The name of the book, Speechless: Controlling Words, Controlling Minds. The author from the Daily Wire, Michael Knowles, joins us here on the program. And Michael, it's been we've waited too long to have you on here for the first time, brother. How you been?
I've been doing great. It's great to be with you, Steve.
So, other than virtually everything, what made you and prompted you to take this on as a topic?
Well, I had a bit of a personal reason, which is that my first book had no words in it. It was called Reasons to Vote for Democrats, a comprehensive guide.
One of the best books I've ever read, by the way. I just want you to know that. Yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It resonated with the American people. It became a bestseller. So I thought the only way to follow up a book with no words is a book that is entirely about words. And that is what Speechless is. Also because it seems to me the manipulation of language is the primary tool that the left uses to invert our culture. And this has been building for a very long time. I'll tell you, I didn't anticipate that big tech oligarchs would censor the duly elected president when I set out to write it. I didn't anticipate that things would get so bad. I mean, it's obviously very good for book sales, very bad for the country. But I suspect that this is going to be the dominant political issue for quite a while longer, because there's this sad fact that conservatives have been fighting against political correctness for about 30 years now. I think it's been going on for about 100 years, as I trace in my book. But this strange phenomenon is that the harder we fight against it, the more ground we lose. And I think it's because conservatives have fallen for a trap by PC. And I think that unless we radically change course, we're going to continue to surrender more and more of the political order.
I want to get back to how we radically change course in a second, but let's look to the past. We often say on our show, the answers to the future and the present can often be found in the past. History doesn't just repeat itself, it also rhymes, okay? And so when you look, I know you're a theology and philosophy and history guy. Agree or disagree with this statement? Whoever controls the flow of information in any culture ultimately has control.
Speech is politics, and politics is speech. You're 100% right, Steve. And it goes back to good old Uncle Aristotle, who says that man is the political animal because we speak. That's what distinguishes us. We can talk and we refer to objective reality with these symbols that we call words, and that's how we govern ourselves. And if you can't do that, then you're reduced to the level of a grunting animal, which increasingly is what our politics looks like, but it's not what it's supposed to look like. So absolutely, if you control speech, whether you're a big tech oligarch or you're the politically correct wordsmiths who work in our educational institutions and elsewhere, if you control speech, you're not just controlling one aspect of the political system, you're controlling the whole thing.
I posted this as a Twitter poll of my following yesterday. We're going to do a bonus overtime segment for our subscribers here on BlazeTV about this after our show here today. But I want to get your take on it, all right? And that is essentially, are we becoming China with gun ownership? You look at a social system that determines who gets to speak and see truth. All right, they have a social credit system. We have big tech. You look at an education system that is largely a statist indoctrination system. The idea of purging non-statist or any non-statist dissent from your own military ranks, for example. I mean, I could give other reasons and parallels, but I think by now the point has largely been made. Or maybe to be more circumspect, the other America is basically a China that at some level allows you to own guns. But really, what's different in Portland, Oregon from, say, Beijing, China?
The only correction I would have to make, Steve, is I'm not sure how much longer we're going to get to own guns. The ACLU, the supposed American Civil Liberties Union, just came out yesterday and said the Second Amendment is racist, and it's always been racist. And as you know, the word racist is now just a synonym for bad. It's the worst thing you can be called in America. Also yesterday, PayPal announced that it's partnering with the Anti-Defamation League, a far leftist organization, to deplatform people from their financial system who are in any way associated with a hate group. And what is a hate group? Well, they defined it so loosely, it includes just about anyone to the right of Hillary Clinton. So now we're not just talking about being able to post your opinions on Twitter or Facebook or elsewhere, put a video on YouTube. We're talking about being able to access banking services. We're talking about financial institutions. So yes, I look over at China and I say, those dystopian monsters, those tyrants, they have a social credit system whereby you can be ostracized if you in any way dissent from the dominant regime. Oh, wait a minute. Things aren't looking great here either.
So let's double back now, or shall we say, circle back. On radically changing course. You used that phraseology a few minutes ago. What does that look like for our side?
So I think that the trap we've fallen into with political correctness is there are two main ways that we respond. Some of the squishes just go along with the new politically correct jargon. Whatever the popular words are they're not really popular, but they are prescribed by the ruling elite. Whatever those words are, we'll just do it. We'll call men women and women men and whatever. Okay, so obviously that advances PC. But then there's the subtler trap for even the more stalwart conservatives, the ones who say, I'm not going to go along with your new PC woke standard. But in so doing, they will abandon standards entirely. They'll sometimes call themselves free speech absolutists or purists or something like that. But the problem here is that political correctness sets out simply to overturn traditional standards. That is the aim. That is what the people who developed it said they were going to do, and that's what they've succeeded at doing. And so even if you say, I'm not going to go along with your standard, but you abandon standards entirely, even then you're going to advance the purpose of political correctness. So I think what the left understood much better than the right does when it comes to free speech and censorship is that PC is actually not a battle between pure free speech on one hand and pure censorship on the other. Actually, from the very beginning of the country, there have been whole swaths of speech that are off limits. Every society has standards. Every society has taboos. Really, what PC brings you is a battle between competing sets of standards. And so if the right, if conservatives are not willing to offer a substantive vision of politics, we're always going to lose because free speech in the abstract doesn't mean anything to people who don't have anything to say.
What you just described, brother, I think this is a tactical error that has been made on the right on virtually every issue. And maybe some of it, I'm beginning to think some of it isn't tactical. It is a philosophical assertion. It's a worldview, meaning that I've not been properly catechized, to use a church term. And so my belief system is pro-America and pro-liberty and pro-freedom, but I don't understand or have rejected really any of the plumb lines or undergirdings of any of those things at all. And so then why don't we just have a total free-for-all and everyone does what is wise in their own eyes? Everyone does what he or she sees fit. You do your thing, I'll do my thing. That you may think in your bubble that is attainable, but the reality is, as you pointed out, the reason the spirit of the age is attacking our standards is not for sort of this amoral vacuum of moral free agency that you think is achievable, but it is with the intent of deconstructing our standard for the full onslaught and introduction of its own. Like we were never not going to have government involved in marriage. Government was either going to uphold marriage or it was going to redefine it. And we keep making this mistake over and over again. And I've come to believe, Mike, I don't think it's tactical. I think it is just a lot of our people on our side are instinctively opposed to the statism, but philosophically they don't understand why it's wrong. And so we just keep storming the Bastille over and over again. Let's fight the French Revolution rather than the American Revolution here.
Right, but we have to remember, we're not anarchists. We don't want no government or super itty-bitty government. We want limited government. So we want the government to observe its proper limits, but surely having something to say about the definition of marriage, surely that falls within those limits. Marriage is the bedrock political institution. Every state in all of human history has had something to say about marriage because it has something to say about children. It has something to say about the way society works. And so when we talk about cancel culture, for instance, cancel culture is nothing new because all cultures cancel. We all think that certain things are so abhorrent that they should not be permitted in polite society. The question is, what are you going to cancel? In the 1950s, you would be canceled for being a communist. Today, you will be canceled for not being a communist. The canceling remains. It's just the standard by which one will be ostracized and canceled.
What's the end game?
The end game here is we need to be able to reassert a positive vision of society. And I know conservatives haven't done it for a long time. I suspect in some cases, as you say, Steve, it's just because they're a little bit confused and they've been brainwashed by a leftist culture. But in some cases, I think it's because they're cowards and they don't want to actually risk anything. There has been an argument made very seriously on the right that we need to permit drag queen story hour. The drag queen story hour is one of the blessings of liberty. And you can hear James Madison rolling over in his grave at the very thought of that. Well, to take that argument seriously, what people are saying is, if we stop perverts from twerking for kids at drag queen story hour, why, they'll stop us from going to church on Sunday.
Right.
Which, practically speaking, they've already been doing for about a year now. But even beyond that, if you're really telling me that we can't discern between a pervert jiggling for a kid and a pastor preaching the gospel, if you really think we can't tell the difference, then what you're saying is we don't have faculties of reason, we don't have moral judgment, and what that means is that we're not capable of self-government. When John Adams says the Constitution's built for a moral and religious people, that's what he's talking about. And so if we are not willing to make those distinctions between true and false and right and wrong and good and bad, that's fine. We can admit that, but then what that means is that the left is going to run the culture. And
if that is a moral equivalency, and this is what I've wrestled with the last few years, okay, and the last few years have radicalized me more than I ever thought imaginable when I got into this business. But essentially, if that's the social compact now, if that's the bargain, then I'm not a Tory anymore. I'm not a conservative anymore. I'm not interested in conserving that society. I want to defeat it. I'm a revolutionary now. You know, I'm interested in conserving things that are true, good, noble, beautiful. I'm not interested in conserving an arrangement that you get to corrupt the children at the library every day of the week so that we can put them in a Sunday school 1 hour a week. That's not a social compact that I'm after. I want to defeat that society.
This is a really important distinction, because what happened, and what I trace in Speechless, is you had a set of standards. You had a kind of traditional society. A lot of the radicals who developed what became PC said that the conservatives have cultural hegemony and we've got to upset everything and we've got to make every settled matter become political and open to public scrutiny. The second wave feminists did this very well in the 1970s. And so once everything's up in the air and unsettled and being debated, then we're going to resettle all the standards on our terms. And you've seen that happen over the last 50 years. So you're right. We are not defending or trying to conserve what has become the recently settled standards. We are trying to return to something that is more noble, more good, more true. That requires a serious vision of politics. That requires recognizing a transcendent moral order. That requires looking back to our forebears and saying they're not all evil, terrible, racist, whatever term they're going to use, that actually we can learn something from them. It requires a little bit of humility if we want to, once again, just as the left did, unsettle their new standards and then resettle them again on lines that are much more conducive to a flourishing society.
It's a #1 national bestseller for a reason. Name of the book, Speechless: Controlling Words, Controlling Minds, from Michael Knowles at the Daily Wire. Mike, fan and respect your work, brother. Thank you for joining us here today on the show, and appreciate the times you've had me on your program as well.
Right back at you, Steve. Thanks for having me.